this. So many people are like, have you checked out what this guy's doing? He's eating nothing but meat, and he's a doctor. He's super healthy.
And I ran into this group of people online that were doing this all meat diet, and I thought they were nuts. And then I went carnivore, and when I was 50, I mean, it was like, I jumped up like 10, 15% of my power output. I got stronger. And I literally felt like I was 10 years younger. My digestion improved. My long-standing tendonitis in my right knee, which I'd had for at least a decade, just went away. And then I got picked up on Rogan's podcast, and then every vegan on the planet sort of painted me as enemy number one because I'm telling people that meat is not bad for you. So
that's so cool.
But you think about society as a whole today. We have a whole population of people that really can't do anything. If you told them to run as fast as they could, they'd fall apart. Disease management. How do we manage your disease, not cure your disease?
Right.
And the healthcare system clearly benefits from that. I don't think that's conspiracy. I think that's just good business practice, to be honest.
Well, this human pet chow isn't real food. Meat is real food. And this government paper isn't real money.
Because I don't think everybody needs to be on a carnivore diet. Even though I advocate for it, I don't choose my meal based on how many animals I think died. That's just a losing argument, because the answer is never going to be zero.
Yeah.
I speak for the animals, and I'm like, I don't know if you do. The biggest lesson that I've discovered as a physician, as someone who's taken care of people for many, many years is, and the earlier you learn that lesson, the less suffering you have, and the better quality of life you'll have ultimately.
Okay, I got to ask you about Bitcoin. Hey everybody, welcome to the What is Money Show. I am thrilled to have you here joining me on my mission to help shine light on the corruption of money. Now, if this is your first time listening to the What is Money Show, I strongly recommend that you go back to episodes 1 through 9 first, which lays a lot of the groundwork for many of the concepts that we explore on the show. These first 9 episodes are my series with Michael Saylor, and thousands of people have told me that this is the best podcast series they've ever heard, hands down, and that it was instrumental to their understanding of money and Bitcoin. So if you're looking to start a deep dive into the nature of money, I don't think there's any place better that you can start other than episode 1 of this show. Now, a little bit about this show and how it makes money. The What is Money Show is 100% sponsor based. So all of our revenues are derived from direct sponsorships. And I strive to be very selective about the sponsors that I work with, specifically only using sponsors that I use personally, and also choosing sponsors that have values which are well aligned to the values expressed on this show, such as freedom, education, self-sovereignty, etc. So what I'm going to do now is a few ad reads right at the top of the show, and then I'll do a few more ad reads in the middle. And I hope you'll take the time to listen to them, as again, these are hand-selected sponsors, and I think you'll like what they have to offer. Today's podcast is brought to you by Wolf's Clothing. Wolf is the first startup accelerator dedicated exclusively to the Bitcoin Lightning Network. 4 times per year, Wolf brings teams from around the world to New York City to work with like-minded entrepreneurs, pushing the boundaries of what's possible with Bitcoin and Lightning. The program is designed to help early-stage companies achieve product-market fit, develop their brand, secure early-stage funding, and grow businesses that help fuel the global adoption of Bitcoin. So go to wolfnyc.com to learn more about the program or apply. Again, that's Wolf NYC, WOLFNYC.com. Dr. Shawn Baker, welcome to the What is Money Show.
Hey, thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
So good to have you here. As I was saying to you offline, first thing I have to do is thank you. You and other guys like Paul Saladino were big influences on me when I was going through my digestive issue health journey. You guys basically gave me permission to eat just beef and salt. And were kind of giving me that proof point that you won't die of a heart attack in 2 weeks if you just eat beef. And that diet really helped me heal up my issues. And now I'm back to eating normal foods. So if it weren't for you guys, I don't know if I would have made it this far. So thank you so much.
Well, I'm glad you got better. That's awesome.
Yeah. So you're a man that's become quite famous for your relatively extreme diet. Could we maybe start there? I guess in many ways you've popularized the carnivore diet. I assume it's something people have been doing before you. So how did you discover the carnivore diet? What is it that got you so focused on it? and how have you helped popularize it?
Yeah. So, like I said, I'm 57 now. So when I was probably in my early 40s, my health was starting to deteriorate. I was probably developing metabolic disease, and I was sitting about 285 pounds. I was a strong, athletic guy, but I just wasn't as healthy as I probably needed to be. And so I started looking into nutrition because I was training, plenty hard. I mean, I was a busy surgeon. I was busy with that, but still, I still found time to take care of my health. And so I started looking into nutrition, and I did what, you're kind of told to do: eat low-fat diet, eat a lot of fiber, limit fat. And I did that, and I lost weight. I mean, it works, and it worked for me. But at the end of that, I felt pretty bad. I mean, I just was not something I could sustain. And so I started looking more into nutrition, and then kind of had an evolution over about 6 years. And I was already at that point kind of relatively low carb and even on a ketogenic diet. And I ran into this group of people online that were doing this all meat diet. And I thought they were nuts. I like these people are nuts, like everybody does, right? But I kind of was intrigued and continued to follow along. And then after about 6 months of kind of observing this, I said, well, let me give it a shot and see what happens. And so back in 2016, I did it for a month. And it was just basically, I think I was just beef, salt, water. I might have had some eggs in there. And I literally felt like I was 10 years younger. I mean, I literally, all the aches and pains of a 50-year-old guy was like, it went away. My digestion improved. My long-standing tendonitis in my right knee, which I'd had for at least a decade, just went away. And I thought that was really, really interesting. And so at some point I started, even just before this, I started shifting my surgical patients to a more kind of a low carb, even a ketogenic approach. And I started seeing, patients that I had on the operating room schedule for either knee or hip replacements start saying, hey, my knee doesn't hurt anymore. My hip doesn't hurt anymore. And I said, well, you've got an x-ray with bone-on-bone arthritis. But since they were asymptomatic, we started canceling surgeries. And I thought that was really kind of an aha moment for me, because I was like, wait a minute, this impacts our health in a very significant way. Because prior to that, I can remember I would see like patients would come in and they would like, doc, whenever I eat bread or gluten, my knee hurts. And I kind of dismissed it as like, yeah, you're kind of crazy. I don't believe that, because nothing I was ever trained kind of led anyone to believe that. And so what it turned out was I was just the crazy one, because clearly this has a role here. So back in 2016, I was on Twitter at the time. I announced that, hey, I'm going to do this crazy carnivore thing. It wasn't even called the carnivore diet then. It was called the zero carb diet for 30 days. And I remember I put a poll out there. What am I going to die of? Because clearly I'm going to either have a heart attack, or I'm going to get scurvy, or my colon's going to fall out because of the lack of fiber. And of course, none of that happened. And then I convinced in early 2017 100 people to do it online, and we just tracked all their data. And they for 90 days we had 100 people do it, and they lost on average almost 30 pounds. They lost like 8 centimeters on their waist. Their heart rate went down by about 10 beats, and then everything subjectively got better. So it was my first sort of foray into this is something that is of significance and it may be clinically useful. So there, then I got picked up on Rogan's podcast, and then every vegan on the planet's, sort of painted me as enemy number one, because I'm telling people that meat is not bad for you. So that's where that started.
That's so cool. For me too, so the first symptom I had, this is prior to the gut issues actually, was I had very sharp pain in my hip. And I would kind of come and go, it would be very sudden. And it wasn't until I had no idea that these things were connected, the gut and the hip. But once I started experimenting with keto diet and then later carnivore diet, just as you said, the pain went away. So what is it about your diet, or I guess eating a meat diet, that causes these joint pains to go away? Is it just a reduction of inflammation, or like what is the pathway that is causing it?
There is fairly interesting evidence. There's a number of studies showing that one, as our overall insulin level falls, there are cells that line all the synovial joints. So any joint with joint fluid, the knee, the hip, the shoulder, wrist, so on and so forth. The synoviocytes actually, when insulin is lower, they tend not to secrete, or I should say the other way around. When insulin is very high, they tend to secrete inflammatory cytokines, and those actually are destructive to the joint. And so over periods of time, we just see joint destruction. So much of, it's kind of funny. As an orthopedic surgeon, I was always told arthritis, typical osteoarthritis is just wear and tear. Just too much weight, too much pressure over time, and the joints wear out. Turns out that there is a huge biological component to that. And that is, affected by our hormonal milieu and inflammatory cytokines. And we know that, for instance, as you saw, there's a clear connection between your gut and the rest of your body. So when our gut is inflamed, hyperpermeable, perhaps some degree of dysbiosis, then you start to see these downstream effects that affect autoimmune conditions, they affect arthritis, they affect mental health, they affect our skin, they affect basically everything, the way we think. Yeah. So it's pretty clear that our gut is like the major interface with the world. We think about our gut, but it's a huge surface area. It's like the size of almost a football field in surface area. Wow. And that's what's interfacing with the world. Right. And from our mouth to our rear end, basically, that's all external to our body. Right. So everything we eat, consume, goes in our mouth, will somehow interact with us, more so than our skin. Our skin is really a barrier, whereas our gut is designed to bring things in. And so if you put the wrong things in there, they're going to be more likely absorbed and then impact the rest of our body.
That makes a lot of sense. So it's like the primary interface organ or pathway with the world. And so if that interface organ is broken or messed up in any way, it causes all these downstream health consequences.
Absolutely, yeah.
You mentioned autoimmune. So when I was going through this whole process, I saw doctors and they would always tell me, you're fine, right? Everything's fine. Your health is perfect. You don't have any issues. I had lower right quadrant inflammation. Basically, typically when I would eat carbs, it would especially flare up and I just didn't feel good. I had skin issues, joint issues. They didn't diagnose me with anything, said I was completely fine. But the one thing they did diagnose me with was autoimmune disease. Fortunately, it's just cosmetic. It's not very, it doesn't affect me functionally. What is the relationship between these grain diets and autoimmune disease? Is it causative or what's going on there?
Yeah, well, it's certainly part of the pathophysiology. And there's a researcher by the name of Alessio Faisano out of Boston Children who's looked pretty extensively into this. And so what is shown is as our gut becomes more permeable, some people call it a leaky gut, there is a clear relationship between an increase in inflammatory markers. We see autoimmune antibodies just perfectly in line go up with that. So I think that is probably the sort of the initiation step in autoimmune disease. And obviously there's a lot of things going on there. But in fact, there was just a recent paper that just came out 2 weeks ago looking at Hashimoto's thyroiditis, which is an autoimmune thyroid disorder where people become hypothyroid. And they showed clearly that a diet change, particularly a low carbohydrate diet, it was a low carb, higher protein diet, dramatically dropped the antibody levels, dramatically reduced thyroid swelling, and improved clinical symptoms. So that's being shown more and more. I mean, there's another study on rheumatoid arthritis showing that actually a high fiber diet makes it worse, which is interesting through the interaction of a particular species of bacteria called Preventative. So yeah, there's something going on for sure with that.
So then have you seen people heal these autoimmune conditions with the all meat diet? And is there anything else to it, or is it just a matter of getting heavy meat in your diet?
Well, I think that yes, the short answer is yes. I've seen many people heal on an all meat diet. In fact, there's a paper coming out of Harvard next month on IBD, inflammatory bowel disease, Crohn's disease, ulcerative colitis. It's a case series of 10 patients with biopsy-proven Crohn's disease or ulcerative colitis, complete remission off all meds, completely asymptomatic. And so I think in order to truly be able to heal one of these diseases, diet is foundational. It may not be the only thing you need to do. You know, there's other lifestyle things, getting good sleep, not being sedentary, there's some circadian biology stuff going on. So I think it's one of the foundational components of that, So if your diet is not right, the likelihood of you putting something in a remission is extremely, extremely low.
Right.
So, but it does happen. I see it pretty regularly. In fact, our company, Rivero.com, we actually have physicians licensed in all 50 states, and that's exactly what we do. One of the things we specialize in is autoimmune diseases.
Gotcha. So you guys are focused on gut rehabilitation, or
Yeah, it's so it's basically like nutritional therapy is what you would technically call it.
Okay.
You know, in addition to other lifestyle things, and we try to, you know, get people off their meds. You know, get them on a diet that's personalized. Maintain them at a you know, for a level, kind of like what you did. You know, maintain it for however long it takes, and then slowly reintroduce whatever's appropriate.
Right.
So that's kind of what we do.
Is that the what I was doing? I guess I basically classified as an elimination diet, pretty much. Right. I went down to beef and salt, and then I would just sort of add things back one at a time and see what affected me and what didn't.
Right.
You're taking people through that type of protocol,
right? Yeah, exactly. But again, it depends on who you are. If you've got somebody who's on a bunch of medications and you just tell them, "Hey, go eat a carnivore diet," you know, some people do, but they can get into trouble. I mean, really, I mean, if you're on a bunch of medications and all of a sudden your blood sugar starts bottoming out, you become hypertensive and fall down and hit your head. So you need, you know, you need some sort of supervision, you know, depending on who you are. So that's,
is that I remember too when I first did the the diet, the first 30 days there seemed to be kind of a transition period. Bowel movements were a bit irregular and things like that. What should people expect in the transition period from a standard diet to a carnivore diet?
I mean, well, if you're on a higher carb diet, obviously things you're going to be reducing significantly are carbohydrates, fiber, and so those things have an impact. You know, obviously energy utilization will change. I mean, there's a period of time, 3 weeks to maybe 8 weeks, where we have to upregulate enzymes. Our gut the cell populations in our gut will change and turn over. There'll be more of certain cells that are used to dealing with protein and fat, and less of ones that are carbohydrate specific. Different hormones will be upregulated and downregulated. So that takes a period of time. Obviously, your gut microbiome will change to some degree. Although interestingly, you know, the studies that we've seen on people on heavily animal-based diets show a very nice diverse gut, because one of the things we hear is you got to have fiber for gut diversity, and that turns out not to be true. So that occurs. Obviously, your bowel frequency will change because, you know, when you're consuming a high fiber diet, you know, we can't digest that. You know, basically we have, you know, a little bit of bacteria in our colon that can sort of ferment that a little bit. But, you know, so you end up with less frequent bowel movements, less stool volume. Some people mistake it for constipation, where it's like you just don't have anything to waste, and so you're absorbing all the nutrition. The other big thing is a lot of people will notice some level of dehydration, because as your insulin level falls, and it often does, your kidneys will no longer hold on to as much salt, and therefore will not hold on to as much water. So you become relatively dehydrated. Additionally, as the protein goes up, you know, we have to deal with protein, and we usually eliminate nitrogen in the form of urea. So basically that's something to be mindful of. And then of course, if you're on any medications, you got to realize that you may need to cut back on those medications.
Gotcha. So do you advise people to supplement with electrolytes then as they're shifting? I found that to be helpful too.
Yeah. I mean, it's something that is often useful. You know, and I mean, some people can just get it by salt, you know, putting salt on their food to taste. I mean, it's a pretty good heuristic, but yeah, some people, particularly like, you know, I like to work out. I'm sweating all the time, and I still supplement electrolytes just because I'm out there using it, you know.
Yeah, got it. So you are a monster, if I may say. You are 6'4", 6'5", 260?
60. I was 260 this morning, yeah.
Right,
like
and
that,
you've been doing the carnivore diet, you said, for 8 years. So that is just basically meat, eggs, 95+% of your diet for 8 years. How have you changed in that 8-year period?
Yeah, so interesting. So I started when I was 49, so I'm 57 now, and you know, I've been an athlete my whole life. I mean, I've set world records in a bunch of different sports. I've always trained hard. There was never a period in my life where I wasn't training. So that hasn't changed. What changed for me was, I remember specifically, I was at that time I was playing around with something called the Concept 2 rowing machine. I don't know if you've ever.
What is it?
It's a Concept 2 rowing machine. It's like, you know, what they do CrossFit, you know, the rowing competition. And that rowing machine is used all over the world. Like Olympic rowers train on that, and they have competitions on that for specific distances. And every year, 40, 50,000 people sort of upload their data and they rank everybody, and there's world records on this. And so when I was 49, I was able to set a couple of American records on the thing. And then I went carnivore, and when I was 50, it was like, I jumped up like 10, 15% of my power output. You know, I got stronger. And I was able to just crush several, I think I got 3 world records on that. And then
Wow.
I just set another one a couple weeks ago, in fact. So that was something that, I was able to just get stronger. Cause I remember thinking, I'm almost 50 and, my knee hurts a little bit. My back's a little sore. I can't train as hard as I could when I was, say, 30. And within about 6 months of Carnivore, I remember one specific goal. I was like 405 pounds for 20 repetitions was a deadlift goal of mine.
Okay.
And when I was 45, I could get it for 15, 16 at most, and then I couldn't get past that. Within 2 months of Carnivore, I remember the first time I tried, I hit 405 for 18, came back the next week, hit it for 20.
Wow.
And I've been trying this for like 5 years. I couldn't do it. So it clearly had a positive impact on my strength. And then over the last 7 years, I've managed to put on probably 10 to 12 pounds of actual muscle as a 50-plus-year-old guy. And I'm not taking TRT or any of that crap. I just train. And so, I've actually been able to put on strength when most guys aren't. Most guys at 50 are losing. And so I've been fortunate to be able to gain. And that's, I attribute that to, obviously I'm still training, but I think the diet does make a difference.
Wow. Have you tested your testosterone levels? Like, are you above average?
No, I'm actually kind of low normal, to be honest. And it's interesting because there is this concept of androgen receptor sensitivity. So it's not, there's a nice study that Stu Phillips did. Stu's one of the world leading protein and muscle researchers, showing that they looked at like 20-year-old athletes, and they trained them, and they sampled their hormone levels, like whether it was testosterone, free testosterone, sex hormone, binding globulin, growth hormone, the DHEA, everything. They looked at all of that, and they found that the only correlate to muscle building, and again, these are guys that are not taking drugs, these are just naturally occurring, is as long as their testosterone was within the normal range, 300 to 1,000 or something like that, the androgen receptor was the main determinant of being able to put on muscle. And so, because we talk about insulin sensitivity, it's like it's nice to be insulin sensitive, or we seem to think that, but there's thyroid sensitivity, there's androgen sensitivity, there's estrogen sensitivity, there's growth hormones. So all of our hormones have receptors, and it depends on how sensitive those receptors are. So there are people that, like you see it, there's a lot of world-class athletes that may not have particularly high testosterone, but they, are very strong. So I don't concern myself with that number.
Right.
I concern myself with how strong am I, what performance, sexual function, those types of things, which are what this is how you're supposed to do it. Because a lot of this testosterone stuff is hey, what's your number? Well, you need to get on this drug. And it's like, well, maybe you don't. Maybe it's, you need to assess what's going on clinically. And so, like I said, there's not a lot of, guys my age that are, can do what I can do at this point.
That's incredible. So could you walk me through like obviously different things on different days, but maybe a normal day in your diet. Yeah. And then are you doing any supplements that in your diet as well?
Yeah. So, I would say over the course of 8 years, a typical day for me would be 2 meals. That's just, it's interesting that the way, beef works or meat works is it's very satiating, as you probably found out yourself. And so you don't have cravings. You don't feel like, you just often don't feel like eating. And so I tend to front load my meals in the morning because I do better with a small meal at night or no meal at night. If I eat a big giant meal of protein at night, it just interferes with my sleep a little too much. So I don't like to do that. So I typically eat 2 meals a day. Again, I'm 6'5" to 60-ish. It's somewhere between 3, almost up to 4 pounds of, meat a day. Or, I'll use a dozen eggs, in place of say a pound of meat, something or similar. A dozen eggs will get you like 72 grams of protein, but something like that. That's been most of the time. Now I'll adjust that depending on what my goals are. When I was trying to gain weight and get stronger, I would increase the meal frequency, 3, maybe 4 meals a day. And then I might go, instead of 3 to 4 pounds, I might eat closer to 5 and sometimes 6 pounds in a day, which is quite a bit. And currently right now, I'm actually going the other way. So now it's time to start trimming down. And so I'm probably closer to 2.5 to 3 pounds a day. And often I'll eat 1 meal a day right now. So it just depends on, the day. And then the training is, I train pretty much every day. It's like, I need it mentally, if nothing else.
Yeah, for sure.
I can't, like we talked earlier, it's just, just sitting on your ass all day is not fun. It's just not good for you. So I got to do something.
And then supplements? You doing any supplements?
Well, I mean, outside of electrolytes, not really. No,
Yeah.
I mean, I don't really, see a real need for it at this point.
Yeah. What about beef organs, or I guess
I don't know. I
organs?
don't. I found it's interesting with the organs, because a lot of people will say the organs are essential, and when I first ran into the crazy people doing this, I asked them about that, and they said, no, it's not. It's not something that we've found to be necessary. And these are people that were doing the diet 10 years, 15 years, 20 years. So there were always are these people doing this, and so I did a survey of 12,000 people on the diet back 3 or 4 years ago. And I specifically asked, organs, organ supplements, things like that. And the outcomes were really no different. So there was no clear difference. And then Harvard, when they did their study on this diet, which was done in 2021, David Ludwig's, Belinda Leonard's, they asked that question as well, because I asked them to. I said, hey, make sure you ask this question. And they found the same thing. They found that there was no difference in whether or not you were diabetic and not diabetic, whether you lost weight, if you included supplements or not. There were no signs of clinical deficiencies. No, I mean, again, that's not, a survey is maybe not a high level study, but it gives you some general guidelines. So I tell people, it's fine to take them if you want them, if you enjoy them. I don't particularly enjoy them. I don't find them to be particularly, tasty.
Yeah.
And I feel that if I'm going to eat something, I need to like it. That just makes sense. And there are people that clearly will tell me, though, however, that eating an organ helps them feel better for a period of time. And I think that might be that people are particularly depleted of nutrition early on. Maybe they're coming from a standard American junk food diet, or perhaps a plant-based diet where they're low on nutrition, and the organs sort of are a faster way to kind of refill the tank, so to speak.
Yeah, I've found that they're difficult to procure, difficult to prepare, difficult to prepare in a way that tastes good. But I do feel, maybe it's just placebo effect, but I do feel good when I eat them, especially liver. I found that to, give me an extra jolt.
Yeah, I hear people saying that for sure. And I've done, I've done my experiments with liver, and I didn't really, I don't like it, so maybe I'm biased, but I didn't really notice anything significant for me. And I've had it prepared by high-level chefs, and it's just like, I'd say the best I can say is that wasn't disgusting. It's like,
definitely has a very unique flavor. That's for sure.
Yeah, for sure.
I've ended up with Paul's company, Heart and Soil, just taking the capsules.
Right. Yeah, sure. Yeah.
And anecdotally, it seemed to improve things for me. I don't know. You're doing so many things at once; it's hard to tell. But
it's with any supplement, I tell people, I said, look, if there's a significant, objective, reproducible benefit, then maybe. Like with the diet, I think with the diet, you had a clear, objective, significant benefit, and you're like, that really made a difference. And if I don't get that, I'm like, why am I paying money for this stuff? It's just that's how I look at things.
Yeah, it's hard to tell, because again, there's times where I travel and I forget. It's like I didn't pack enough Heart and Soil supplements for the trip, and then when I don't have them for a few days, I kind of feel different. But it's hard to tell. But it's one of those things. It's like, why not? It can't hurt almost, and so I do enjoy them a lot. On the training side, are you doing strict programmatic training? Are you training by instinct? Are you how do you approach that?
It depends on my goal at the time. I've been training for 45 years. I've been training, so a lot of it's instinctive. A lot of it's just what I feel like doing. It depends on the weather sometimes. This is like what I want to accomplish. I generally, again, I'm an older guy. I think there's some basic boxes I want to fill in, some check marks. I want to make sure I'm strong. I want to make sure I do some level of hypertrophy work. I want to make sure that my chassis holds up, my tendons, my ligaments. I do some level of, like we were talking about, some plyometric type stuff. Now a lot of throwing, a lot of jumping, and then of course the conditioning side of it. And so I do a lot. I enjoy doing a lot of sprint interval training. So I'll do like high intensity sprints, but I also do a lot of just walking. So that to me is I think honestly, when it comes to training, for the average person that just wants to be healthy, not being sedentary is probably the biggest thing you can do. If you go from not sedentary, or from sedentary to not sedentary, you're going to have a huge benefit. And then, going from not sedentary to busting your ass, you're going to get a benefit, but it's going to be of smaller and smaller returns. There's a certain, being a world-class athlete, I don't know if it confers you any more advantage than just being a relatively good in shape person that doesn't,
Yeah. You can get the, definitely, I think if you just, as you said, even just walking, right, an hour a day, that's a huge health benefit compared to not moving day in, day out. And then it seems like the training, well, there's definitely a big cognitive benefit, I think, probably for you too. It's like my drug, basically, right? Like I work with my brain day in, day out. I have to let the animal out to play. And so I go to the gym and just get out of my mind, into my body, kind of meditate on the pain and matching movement with breath. Like I enjoy all of these things. But you're really just, I guess, at that point, working towards performance and working towards aesthetics, I guess. But it's not maybe giving you that huge incremental benefit, as you're saying, is like going from sitting on your ass all day to walking.
Yeah.
So what are you doing next? Like, what is your current goal? Are you trying to break more of these rowing world records? Are you trying to set a new deadlift? Personal best? Like, what are you trying to do performance-wise?
Yeah, as far as my athletic goals, there's a couple more rowing world records I want to hit in the next couple of months. Then I want to start working on some some sprinting, running type stuff. There's some targets I'd like to hit in, say, the 400 meter, 200 meter, 100 meter. And then after that, like I said, as I get closer to 60, I'd like to be able to dunk a basketball when I'm 60. So, that's, you think of dunking a basketball for a tall guy is not that big of a deal. But I got to tell you, when you're 60, it's harder, particularly when you're heavy. 260. When you weigh 260, I'll probably have to trim down. The things I will have to do in order to achieve dunking a basketball at 60, that journey will be a good journey for me, because it'll require me to be very lean and fast and springy and athletic. And I think those are good qualities to have. And I think, just to the mental side of this, you think about it whenever, like anytime you get injured, say you like pull a hamstring sprain or something, you're kind of hobbled a little bit.
Yeah.
You feel vulnerable.
Yeah,
you just feel like, and it's anxiety provoking. And I think it's like, if I don't feel like I could physically deal with whatever, and it's not like there's, bad guys jumping on all the time, but you always feel like, hey, if I can't defend myself right now because of an injury, it wears on you mentally. And
it's emasculating in a way, right?
Well, it is a way. But, you think about society as a whole today. We have a whole population of people that really can't do anything. If you told them to run as fast as they could, they'd fall apart. They literally would tear their hamstring, tear their quads, tear their Achilles.
Yeah.
They literally can't do anything. And so that's what I can't imagine like walking around like that day in and day out feeling almost useless and helpless.
Yeah.
And that's what we have a whole society that.
Yeah, and it permeates every other domain of your life, I think. If you're physically incapable,
you're physically impotent, and you feel like, what about the rest of life? Yeah.
Right. I almost admire people that can really have high levels of confidence and not be physically fit, because I'm not sure where that's coming from, frankly. It's like, if I don't feel physically competent, as you're saying, to sort of deal with whatever happens in the world, that would take a heavy toll on any other type of competence I would try to muster. One last question about the training. You mentioned the term hypertrophy. Is that bodybuilding exercises you're doing?
Yeah, just basic building. It's like higher volume type stuff.
Yeah.
So we know that, generally there's a trend towards getting stronger, lifting heavier stuff, putting on more muscle. It tends to be a little more volume based and isolation type stuff. So I do a lot of high rep stuff. I do a lot of low rep stuff. I do a lot of, there's an infinite variety of ways you can, more sets, more reps, more, whatever.
Drop sets.
I'm always pushing myself. I'm always competing with myself. Like, what did I do? What was I doing a year ago? Can I beat that? And that's kind of keeps me in the game. And there's a minimal acceptable standard that I have for myself for certain things. If I get below that, it wears on me, and I don't know, I don't know at what age it's going to change. You figure, I can remember when I was in my 20s, and wait till you get to be 30, and then wait till you get to be 40.
Yeah.
And I was like, still here, still going. So,
are you? Because usually when you post your videos, it looks like you're training solo in a home gym.
Yeah.
Do you train in outside gyms much, or do you prefer to train solo?
Well, just for the convenience factor, I train at home at a gym just because it's, it's there. It's and there's no excuse. When you got to drive 20 minutes and fight with whoever for whatever piece of equipment you want. And, the gym I built at home, I've built that over the last, 10, 15, 20 years, and added little by little of things I like to do. And I find it. I train kind of in a unique way that most people probably wouldn't want to do, quite honestly. So I've trained, you know, and it's. I mean, I like going to the gym, and I like when other people come over because it just raises the level of effort because you're like, all right, I got some competition.
Yeah,
here.
exactly.
But I mean, I'm intrinsically motivated to do it, and I mean, you know, it's just like brushing my teeth. I'm going to do that every day. I'm going to train every day, and but yeah, I mean, I would say 98% of my gym sessions are me by myself in my home, maybe my dog's in there with me, something like that. But that's pretty much it.
I admire that because I do feed off of that energy at the gym when other people are training really hard.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
My gold standard was Gold's Gym, Venice Beach. I lived in LA for 4 years. I used to walk down there, and you know, a lot of pro bodybuilders, a lot of pro fitness people. Everyone in there is training with a purpose, and my training intensity had never been higher. I think just feeding off of that energy. But there is a trade-off, as you're describing. Like you got to kind of fight with people for equipment and all of that. But I find it much harder to hit that level of intensity alone. So is there a certain mental framework you're using for that? Like, or how do you, I guess, get yourself to that high level of intensity?
I mean, it's
alone?
interesting. Like for instance, with rowing, I mean, I remember there was a guy when I first broke the world record. I was like, there's another. He was a big Norwegian guy. He was actually a German kind of shot putter, but he was in Norway and just a big guy. And I was looking at him. I was like, I can beat him. I mean, it's just one, you know, just put that, and he's a nice, super nice guy, but I portrayed him as this bad person. Right? I'm going to beat his ass, and that's what I just kind of mentally focus on, you know, some level. I'm very competitive. I'm a competitive guy. I like to. I'm doing Spanish, and I'm like, I got to be number one on the weekly rankings of my Spanish training. You know, just because I like competing. So, and if you know, it's nice to find like someone you can say, that's just another human being with 2 arms and 2 legs.
Right.
If he can do it, I can do it, type of thing. So that's what kind of drives me on that stuff. And you know, it sometimes drives my wife crazy because, God damn it, you're too competitive. So anyway, that's just the way I am.
But then you've managed to do that against yourself. It sounds like that's how you're driving.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of times I'll look at myself like I'm looking at myself at 50. Yeah. And I'm like, you know, I'm 57. I should be able to beat. I think in my mind I can beat myself 7 years ago, and to some degree I have, and depending on what thing we're talking about. But I remember it's like the work I had to do at 50 to get to a certain level. I'm like, man, do I want to do it at 57? Right. It's a lot of work, you know. It's kind of, because you set that bar higher and higher, and it's harder to get. I mean, even though I can like break a world record as it currently stands, I'm like still wanting to beat myself. Yeah. Even though I don't have to, but I still want to.
Yeah. That's a great skill to have, I think, to always be able to compete against yourself. Because that way you're not dependent on others to get that level of intensity. That's impressive.
We want you to join us for 2 days of discussions and debate, which is all happening at the inaugural Dissident Dialogues 2024.
This incredible event will take place in Brooklyn on May the 3rd and 4th. You'll be joining leading thinkers such as Richard Dawkins, Steven Pinker, Ayaan Hirsi Ali, John McWhorter, Aisha Akambi, Michael Schellenberger, Mary Harrington, Chris Williamson, Winston Marshall, Konstantin Kisin, Francis Foster, and more.
Hang on a second, since when have you ever been a serious thinker?
I love thinking, it's my favourite hobby. Sometimes, of an evening, it's all I do. Think.
Moving swiftly on, we want you to join us for a gathering where everyone is part of the conversation. Conservatives, progressives, atheists, theists, left, right, and everything in between.
Dissident Dialogues presents a rare opportunity to immerse yourself in a conversation with the most influential thinkers of our time.
We'll tackle important topics relating to religion, science, politics, and culture. If you're driven by intellectual honesty, curiosity, and a desire for the truth, Dissident Dialogues is the place for you.
It's not just an event, it's the beginning of an intellectual journey, and we want you to come along for the ride. I like rides.
Dissident Dialogues is a place for dangerous ideas. Buy your tickets now at dissidentdialogues.org and be part of the conversation.
Forget multivitamins and other supplements. Animal organs are the most nutrient-dense foods on the planet. You can get 100 times more nutrients from organs than you can from muscle meats. But the problem with eating organs is that they are difficult to find in stores, they are difficult to prepare, And even when they are prepared well, they often don't taste great. Thankfully, Heart and Soil Supplements has made consuming organ meats so much easier by providing powderized organs in capsule form. Organ meats include everything your body needs to thrive: vitamins, minerals, peptides, proteins, and growth factors. This is why organ meats were the most prized foods for our ancestors. Fortunately for us, Heart and Soil makes these treasured foods easily accessible. So go to heartandsoil.co today and use discount code BREEDLOVE to get started on your journey to optimal health and vitality. Again, that's heartandsoil.co, discount code BREEDLOVE. Over the past 9 years, I've been going through a pretty serious struggle with my personal health. It started with a sharp pain and stiffness in my hip after a lifting injury, which I later learned was related to some pretty extensive inflammation in my gut. Then I developed an autoimmune issue, and soon I was having joint pain all over, skin irritations, and all kinds of digestive issues. I visited many doctors trying to figure out what was wrong, but none of them were able to help me fix any of my issues. I eventually started to see an energy healer with whom I had some limited success, but it wasn't until I started working with the biohacker Anthony DiClementi last year that I was finally able to start making real progress on my healing journey. Anthony spent a lot of time with me learning about my specific situation and worked with me to adapt a custom health plan to address my needs. Anthony has served as a personal biohacker for celebrities, billionaires, and professional athletes all over the world. Besides helping people like me overcome health issues, Anthony and his world-class medical team also help guys that just want to optimize their cognitive performance, guys that want to pack on some muscle, and guys that just want to get shredded. Anthony keeps a tight book of business and is selective about the clients he brings on. To apply for Anthony's biohacking services, text Breedlove to 847-943-7221. Again, to apply for Anthony's biohacking services, just text Breedlove to 847-943-7221. So we didn't mention this earlier, but you were once an orthopedic surgeon. Mm-hmm. And you since basically decided you were going to change your focus. I don't know when exactly that occurred, that you were going to focus on diet and nutrition as a means to help people fix their health. So basically shifting from treatment-based surgical procedures to preventative, nutrition-based approach to medicine and health. What was the catalyst for that transition for you?
Yeah, as I kind of alluded to earlier, as an orthopedic surgeon, I was doing a lot of joint replacements, and we had a local sort of community of orthopedic surgeons. We were frustrated that we were getting more and more obese patients to operate on, and obesity is obviously extremely prevalent. And when you operate on someone with obesity, they just have a high rate of complications, infections, blood clots, wound healing problems, post-operative, stiffness and range of motion issues. And so we were together as a community, said, hey, look, we're not going to operate on people if their BMI is over 35. And everybody agreed to that because otherwise one guy would just get all the people that would do this. And so it was like left to us to figure out how to get them to lose weight. And there was a bariatric surgeon doing gastric bypass procedures, but he couldn't do it all. And it was like, there was no way we could get that. So we took it upon ourselves to try to encourage our patients to lose weight. And as I mentioned, I started putting people on these low carb diets, and, a certain percentage would do, not everyone would do it. Maybe 20% of people would actually do it. And the ones that did, again, I saw this tremendous improvement in their overall pain level to the point where I was canceling surgeries. And, the interesting thing, and when I went into medicine, when I was a 16-year-old kid thinking I want to be a doctor and studying for the MCAT and, getting into medical school and graduating with honors and went into surgery. And I found about 15 years in, I was like, all this stuff I'm doing is just, it's just Band-Aids. It's not, even if I put a joint replacement in somebody, I'm not really fixing their disease. It's still, because the other knee would come, they come back and see me a year later for their other knee. And I would pat myself on the back because, oh, good job, you made their one knee feel good, they want to see you again. But the reality was I probably could have prevented the second surgery, depending on how early you could have gotten and did an intervention. So that kind of woke me up a little bit. And I realized that as I attempted to start doing that within my own surgical practice, and I was an employed physician, I was the chief of the hospital group for orthopedics, that the administration didn't want that. They didn't want me canceling surgeries. They wanted me to keep turning the wheel, because that's how they make the money.
Right.
So that was kind of eye-opening to me, that medicine is really a business. I mean, it shouldn't be a surprise these days, but it really is. It really is. And the patient's health is kind of a secondary concern. I mean, as long as you can do a procedure on you, that's good. And maybe you're generally pushing somebody to feel a little bit better, but are you fixing them to the point that they don't need healthcare anymore? No, you're not.
Yeah.
And that's the whole thing. It's a sustainable business model that we continue to have customers basically for life. And that's what we're seeing more and more. And I think where medicine's going is going to be just more and more of that. We're kind of accepting that it's normal to be on drugs. It's normal to need medications. And that's what we're being conditioned to believe.
Yeah, I've heard that described as it's more of sick care rather than health care, because they actually want you to stay symptomatic.
Yeah,
so
I mean,
keep treating.
there was a term that was coined about, I don't know, maybe 20 years ago. We started talking about this concept of disease management. How do we manage your disease, not cure your disease? Right. It was just, we're just going to, and I even call it disease maintenance, because we just maintain people in a state of disease. And the healthcare system sort of creates this. We kind of have this, okay, you're going to be on these drugs the rest of your life. You're going to need these assistive devices. When I remember, like, you've seen people with the mobile scooters, they're obese or sometimes they have some issue or like neurodegenerative disease where they can't use it. But I would have people come into my clinic, orthopedic issues with knee pain or back pain, and they say, hey, I want a scooter to get around. I would always refuse, because I'm like, to me, that is like a mobile coffin. It literally, it's just forcing you to become less and less independent, and it's taking away your ability. It's really disempowering. You think about it, people say, well, now I can zip around down the street, but now you become like an eyeless fish. We have these fish that live at the bottom of the ocean, don't have eyes because they don't need eyes. It's like, well, if I can just sit on a scooter all day, what do I need my legs for?
Right.
And so I found it, my preference was, let's have people that are healthy and independent and functional and happy and empowered, rather than depressed, disempowered, and so on and so forth, with what we do now today.
So this sounds like a particularly pernicious problem, because it's an incentive trap, basically, right? That the mainstream medical establishment is incentivized to keep giving people more treatments, more drugs, more surgeries, rather than heal the root cause, because if you heal the root cause, you've lost a customer. Is there a viable solution to this, I guess, misapplication of incentives or bad incentive?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's financial. I think, right now it behooves financially the healthcare system to have a lot of sick people and chronically be there, right? But who is it hurting? So you guys, who's feeling the pain? Well, obviously the patients are feeling the pain, but they don't really have maybe the financial wherewithal. So I think it lies within other industries and other companies. And so if you can say, you can go to Ford Motor Company and say, hey, look, you've got, 100,000 employees and 20% of them are diabetic, and they're costing you, Ford Motor Company, through your healthcare costs, many, many millions of dollars a year. If we can offset that and reduce the cost for you, then that's where the financial incentive, and that's what our company is set up to do. So we will be taking employees, saving Ford Motor Company a bunch of money. Now, perhaps Pfizer loses out, but at the same time, I'd rather have Pfizer and Ford fighting it out than Pfizer and some little company, right? So that's where the incentive's going to come from. So if we have, productive, healthy, happy people, it's going to benefit every industry outside of healthcare, right?
Right. Yeah. So the payor, right, whether it's the employer or the individual, they're carrying the cost of that sick care burden.
Right.
Whereas if you get them back to healthcare and actually healing disease, then it reduces their cost.
Yeah, it's interesting. I found that, like, the insurance companies, they're like, by law, can only, like, as profit, take about 15% of premiums, right? So it behooves them to drive the cost up even higher, because if they're capped at 15%, they want the overall number to go up. So that's why they have these more and more expensive drugs. We have these pharmacy benefits managers that keep driving up the healthcare cost, so that, even an insurance company, like, it's interesting because, like, CVS is now a healthcare company. They own, I think it's Caremark, which is a pharmacy benefits manager. They own Aetna, the insurance company. So you have a pharmaceutical distribution center, a pharmacy owning a health insurance company, which is like, think about the conflict of interest incentives there. It's like the incentive would be sell people more drugs,
of course,
drive up the cost, make more profit that way.
God, that is a great, I'd never thought about that, but that is another great example of where government interference literally backfires, right? They try to cap insurance company profits, but that actually drives insurance companies to increase
the overall
total cost structure. The name of this, we usually call it the Cobra problem. There's this old example of they had a cobra problem in a village. So the head of the village is like, all right, I'm going to start paying a reward for every dead cobra that you bring me, in an attempt to eliminate the cobras. And what it actually does is incentivize people to start breeding cobras.
So they can kill them. Yeah, exactly.
And so it's this, let the free market handle it, right? There's almost, I can think of, obviously I'm pretty diehard libertarian, but I can think of zero situations where government interference actually fixes a problem that the market would have fixed better. And that's another good example of it. Okay, you've said on that topic, obviously our healthcare system has some serious problems and conflicts of interest as you've just described. What are the biggest problems or biggest conflicts of interest in the healthcare system? And are there ways that individuals should think about to sidestep these problems or otherwise avoid getting caught in the crossfire of these conflicting interests?
Yeah, it's an interesting thing because, the average person knows very little about health and sickness. And so it's kind of like you're dependent upon, you think these trusted individuals, your physician, to give you the best advice. And honestly, most physicians are, I think, ethical and trying to do the best they can given the knowledge that they have. The problem is, like, for instance, my medical education was subsidized and in large part paid for by the pharmaceutical industry. All of my subsequent education is subsidized and paid for by the pharmaceutical industry. Hospitals are often propped up by pharmaceutical industry. So we have this, inextricably, married system with healthcare and pharma for one. So that's clearly, a significant problem because, it's hard to get out of that, and that's the paradigm. And it's just like, what we're going to see is with the introduction of AI into healthcare, which is, inevitably going to occur. What we'll have is you'll be able to sit at home. There might be some sort of app or interface where you stick your finger in a little machine which can analyze your blood. It'll upload data to the AI. It'll make a diagnosis, ask you a few questions, and then come up with a solution, pharmaceutical solution, of course. And you might have the drugs delivered to your house that afternoon. And there'll be a physician way in the background, like signing off on this stuff because of state licensing requirements. But that will sort of, do away with the need of the pharmaceutical industry to bribe physicians because as it stands right now, take you out to dinner, buy your office lunch, fly you to conferences, pay for your education. So now if they can just directly go to the consumer and convince the consumer, well, you don't need to go. You don't need to put on your clothes and go see the doctor. Just log on and we'll do that there. So that's where it's going to happen. It's going to go that way. And for those people that like that, it's like, hey, I like the fact that my doctor always refills my pills on time. I mean, there's some people that actually that's where they get the 5 out of 5 star scores because like my doctor always answers the phone and he always gives me my prescription. So for a certain segment of the population that have sort of, I don't know if they bought into or just feel like they're hopelessly stuck in our food system because our food system is probably in large part a root cause of some of this issues. We've got that to look forward to. And like I said, I think there will be viable alternatives, and I think our company, among others, are part of that solution to where you can sort of say, hey, every year, like it's an election year, and whenever healthcare comes up, it's talking about how are we going to pay for Medicare and their seniors to have access to medicines and how do we get affordable medicines? The answer, to me, it's like rearranging the deck chairs on a Titanic. It's like, why aren't we talking about let's not have so many damn sick people in the first place? And until we really go after that, and I don't know if we ever will, at least in a large way. I don't expect whoever, I know you had RFK here there. Maybe he would come up and say, hey, we're going to fix healthcare, but we're going to stop eating garbage. I mean, I can't remember. Maybe John F. Kennedy was the last president. I think Kennedy was pretty big into this. Like, let's have a fit population. And, back in the 60s, they were a hell of a lot healthier than we are today when we look at our youth. So I don't know if we'll see anybody come up there and say, hey, it's a problem. I know there's a lot of people now talking about the problem. Is it just lip service, or will there be any actual thing going on? I don't know, because, one of the problems is, people start talking about outlawing food, which I think obviously as a libertarian, you like, that's not the solution either. Yeah. So you got to, I think it makes sense to say, hey, this is garbage, don't eat it.
Yeah.
And then if you decide to do it, it's like smoking. Hey, cigarettes are there if you want them, but it's kind of stupid if you eat them.
Right. Yeah. Maybe some warning labels, perhaps, if there are studies, it's like seed oils.
Well, here's the thing. They'll put them on beef. That's what we'll see. We'll have this packet of beef say, look, beef is shown to be a class 2 carcinogen, and, blah, blah, blah. That's because we have that sort of bias, this anti-meat bias. It's there. So I'm even concerned about that. It's like, the one thing that I've always, because there's a lot of people out there that say things and you can't verify. Like, we'll look at like climate change, for instance. I have no way of individually verifying if the Earth's getting hotter or colder. Right. I can't tell that. There's no way for me to. What I can do is look in the mirror and know if I'm healthy or not.
Yeah.
That's something I can individually verify. So that's what I tell people. Just look, if you go to the physician and he tells you you're fine, like when you went to the there's nothing wrong with you. Like, wait, there's something is. I'm not. You got to do that. You got to be your own advocate,
Yeah, 100%. And that was, that was a lesson that I had to learn, basically, is that you are ultimately the arbiter of your own health, right? It's how you feel and how you look and how your energy levels are, your productivity, et cetera. The doctor can't just say you're fine and that be true, right? It's either it's true for you or it's not. So obviously there's a deep connection between what we've done to the industrialized food system, the types of ingredients we're using, seed oils, high fructose corn syrup, et cetera, and this pervasive emergence of different conditions, right? Different autoimmune conditions, metabolic diseases, et cetera. Do you think there's concerted action between big food and big pharma? Is this part of that sick care hamster wheel that there are big food companies trying to get people onto the sick care platform so that big pharma and big medicine can reap these endless revenues?
Yeah, it's certainly a symbiotic relationship, and I think that the food industry absolutely knows that the food that they are producing is, number one, addictive. Mm-hmm. And they have food. I had a food chemist who worked for one of these big food companies for like 25 years, retiring. And she told me, I feel so guilty because my job was to make this food as addictive as possible. That was my mission as a scientist. Wow. And so they've employed these people. He goes back to Moskowitz and the Bliss Point back in the 1970s or something like that, where they found this combination of salt, fat, and sugar was like this perfect thing that you would continue to overeat it. So we know, they know that's going on. They intentionally make food that is as addictive as possible. And of course, they use as cheap ingredients as they possibly can, because that's how they make more profit. And I think that clearly it's resulted in a sick populace, and the healthcare system clearly benefits from that, having patients. And so I don't think that's a secret anymore. And I think both entities know that, and they're choosing not to actively change that. So they're basically, by ignoring it or accepting it, sort of, propping it up, I suppose. So I think there is certainly, whether it's intentional or not, they're benefiting from it, and they're not doing anything to stop it. So effectively, you could say they're basically colluding to ensure the status quo continues on.
Right. Yeah. I think I had Ed Dowd on the show once, and he was saying a lot of these, what we would call conspiracies, right? It doesn't have to be James Bond-esque, a bunch of guys in a room smoking cigars, plotting this evil scheme. It can just be what he used the term meta fraud, where there's basically just broken incentives and opportunists that are seizing those opportunities that they're incentivized to do. And then you end up with this sort of, perverted situation, right? Where you got, big food poisoning people and big medicine profiting
and you
from
just
the poisoning.
The other guy. He's like, well, it's not my fault.
Right.
These guys, so, it's like,
exactly.
You could call them out and not support them.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's interesting because, these new drugs, these GLP-1 receptors, Ozempics and some of the others in that class, there was a little sort of a palpable concern within the big food industry about, what are we going to do if these people stop craving our food? And I mean, that's a whole different topic, but it's interesting to see that they're like, okay, what can we do to continue to hack beyond that? Because it's like they want to continue to, like, it's like they'll move and counter move. They'll continue to sort of make sure it's as addictive as possible. And I think those drugs over the long course, for most people, will end up being a failure, unfortunately.
Yeah, it all sounds like glorified drug dealing, right? Whether it's these addictive foods or these addictive drugs, frankly. Crazy stuff. You've referenced this study about financial incentives for ultra-processed foods and discussed the connections between that and large asset managers like Vanguard, BlackRock, et cetera, who also own large portions of those processed food manufacturers and pharmaceutical companies. Do you believe there's an orchestrated attempt by those asset managers to either sicken the population with processed food and treat the illness with pharmaceutical drugs, kind of like what we were just describing, or is it simply the outcome of the short-term profit-driven actions by mostly separate entities? So as the situation we were just describing, there's also sort of this common ownership in large asset managers like BlackRock, Vanguard. Is it possible, probable that these large asset managers are then perpetrating this sick care hamster wheel scheme?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's clear. I mean, you look at some of the, things in the portfolio of, Vanguard, BlackRock, and they have a significant, number of these, processed food companies, whether it's Nestle or Procter & Gamble or Danone and things like that. So they've got all these significant interests and it's gone up over the last 20 years significantly. So they know it's a good profit maker for them and for their shareholders or the people that depend on them to make profit. So I think that fact alone encourages them to own that, own interest in those companies. And I think that obviously, as powerful as they are, I mean, they influence probably all policies that are done. And so they probably are going to be, pulling the levers one way or another to make sure that those profits continue to occur. And so I don't think that's conspiracy. I think that's just good business practice, to be honest. And I think we're all the sort of the beneficiaries, kind of negative beneficiaries in that way. And so I think that's really what's going on. Again, is it the James Bond villain behind the scene? I mean, maybe. I mean, there's those people exist. I mean, I think they do, but I mean, how many of them are sitting at the head of, is it Larry Fink or something like that? I don't know. I don't know that.
He seems like such a nice guy, though.
Well, I'm sure on camera he is, yeah.
Thanks to my friends at Swan Bitcoin for supporting the show. Swan sponsored the Sailor Series, and I appreciate their support from the very beginning of the What is Money show, and I'm happy to welcome them back. Swan has grown a lot since then. They've built a full-service, Bitcoin-centric financial services company with several different offerings. With the Swan app, you can set up instant and recurring Bitcoin buys, and with this, you can get started at swan.com/breedlove. Swan also enables clients in the US to hold Bitcoin directly in an IRA account, so you can hold Bitcoin in a tax-advantaged way. Get started at swan.com/IRA. If you're looking to buy more than $100,000 worth of Bitcoin, check out Swan Private. You'll get concierge support for buy execution, retirement accounts, inheritance and estate planning, and access to exclusive events, research, and other content. Get started at swan.com/private. Swan Institutional provides financial services to institutions, including Bitcoin-backed lending, asset management, principal investments, Bitcoin services for financial advisors, and Bitcoin mining operations. For those new to Bitcoin, I recommend checking out Swan's Welcome to Bitcoin course at swan.com/welcome. So go to swan.com/breedlove today to get started on your Bitcoin buying journey. Are you sick of being robbed by politicians through inflation and endless money printing? If so, you need to be at Bitcoin 2024 in Nashville, Tennessee on July 25th through 27th. As the largest Bitcoin and Fintech conference in the world, Bitcoin 2024 stands as a beacon of monetary freedom, a glimmer of hope amongst a darkening macroeconomic backdrop. Top speakers, companies, and thought leaders from across the industry will convene in Nashville to look ahead to the next year and beyond. I will be there, and Bitcoin conferences like this have become my favorite place to socialize since becoming a Bitcoiner. Ticket prices will increase soon. Get your tickets now and secure your spot at this game-changing event. So go to b.tc/conference and use discount code Breedlove to sign up for the Bitcoin 2024 conference. Again, that's b.tc/conference, discount code Breedlove.
I got to ask you about Bitcoin. So a lot of people, I think, have taken the path from Bitcoin into carnivory. People like Saifedean, Bitstein, these guys have really popularized the carnivore diet in the Bitcoin community. Some people have taken the reverse path, like yourself, from carnivory to Bitcoin. We had Brett Ender on yesterday from the Meat Mafia podcast. He's followed a similar path as you. Who or what delivered you the orange pill? How did you come to Bitcoin, and how did you, I guess, what was your light bulb moment about Bitcoin?
Yeah, well, you mentioned Saifedean. So, I mean, I actually, he was doing a carnivore diet before I did, which is interesting, and he's from Lebanon. And he, I guess, got wind of me on Twitter doing this because I was one of the early guys talking about that. And he was like, hey, there's another crazy dude doing this all meat diet. So he actually contacted me and suggested that he and I write a book together about this diet. And I met with him in up in the Seattle area when I was up there for a period of time, and had dinner with him and had conversed with him over the years. And I still keep in contact with him reasonably frequently. But yeah, he's the one that sort of started talking to me about Bitcoin. And I didn't know I didn't understand it. And I read his book, and it was a pretty good book about kind of introducing me into what this is all about. And I've, I guess for good or bad, and I think for good generally, he kind of steered me away from any of the other cryptocurrencies, like all shit coins, you guys, as you would agree, I'm sure. So that was my introduction. And Michael Goldstein, or Bitstein, as you mentioned, kind of helped me to get set up to actually jump in and do it. Because Saifedean introduced me to it, and I just kind of kept it in my back of my mind, but I never really, in retrospect, I regret not acting on it earlier. But anyway, I eventually jumped into the market. I think it's been about 3 or 4 years now, and have just been, basically dollar cost averaging ever since. Kind of just put in a little every routinely, and just go from there. So that's been I'm not by any means a Bitcoin expert. I'm just going to put some stuff in there and not look at it, and just let it do what it does over time. And maybe in 10 years from now, it'll be something. It'll be the right decision, which I think it will be. I mean, and I think the interesting thing is, because you mentioned the overlap between carnivory and Bitcoin, I think there's a general sense of there has to be better than we have now.
Right.
And it's, it's kind of the democratization of health and finance and all the things that I think there's a lot of parallels between, we talk about fiat currency, but fiat food. I mean, there's a book written about that by Matthew Lysiak that wrote this, and it's the same thing. I mean, the food, what we are being convinced is food these days is, in my view, I mean, it's human pet chow is what it really is. I mean, it's just like all this garbage. I mean, it tastes good, but I mean, it's just like, it's not what you need to be eating, And you think about when you go back to like the stockyards, the stock exchange, it was about meat initially. It was cows, and that has a very financial. I mean, back in the day, your dower would be how many cows or something like that. Yeah. That was a form of wealth because it was hard to acquire, or harder to acquire.
Yeah.
And so I think there's a lot of parallels between good nutrition, which is valuable to us, and Bitcoin, which is now becoming de facto valuable based on, what is it, over $1 trillion market cap?
Yeah, well over. And I mean, it's cattle used to be money, right? It's one of the original forms of money. The word pecuniary, right, comes from the word pecune, which pecuniary means related to money, but pecune means cow, basically, or bovine. So there is this deep relationship between food and money, right? It's like food is the original money in many ways because, well, that's the thing everyone needs and we can all trade for. It's interesting too that there's kind of I guess the commonality among carnivores or keto, I don't know what you call that group, just people that seek alternative diets, ancestral diets maybe is the right term, and Bitcoiners, is that it is a return to kind of ancient wisdom, right? Like we've known the benefits of sound money for a long time, and we've been eating meat for millions of years, and only in the past 100-ish years have we really gotten off track on both fronts. And so it seems like both cohorts of people are just kind of truth-seeking individuals that aren't, as you said, aren't accepting that, well, this human pet chow isn't real food, meat is real food, and this government paper isn't real money, right? It's just this uncollateralized government debt certificate undergoing slow motion default while we bear the cost via inflation. Like it's just a scam, basically. So people that are truth-seeking and or disagreeable seem to see through these illusions and figure out that, hey, maybe I should eat some more meat and hold some more Bitcoin. The other thing I think about the commonality between these two is, and so I don't know if you would agree with this, meat is really valuable in the sense that it has a lot of nutrient density relative to other foods. And Bitcoin's really valuable against other monies because it has purchasing power density. Like the more value it contains, for any other money, there's an incentive to increase the supply of it and debase it, right? If gold goes up in price, well, then miners produce more gold. If fiat goes up in purchasing power, then central bank prints more dollars. But if Bitcoin goes up in purchasing power, still 21 million Bitcoin, right? So it holds the energy that's inside of it without getting debased or diluted. And maybe there's just like kind of a structural similarity between the two there.
Well, I mean, if you look at like meat as sort of the Bitcoin standard of nutrition, so to speak, then everything else by comparison, it's like, they try to convince you, it's like this huge, you've been all duped into thinking that this other stuff is, because here's what they tell you, eat all this crappy, cheap grain-based food. We've got this. So we've got the USDA who sets our dietary guidelines. And oh, by the way, the USDA's mission also is to sell all these commodities. So they've got to sell corn. They've got to sell wheat. They've got to sell sugar and soybeans and beef and eggs, to be honest. But I mean, so the guidelines always represent that. It's like eat a little bit of everything because we produce it, and it's part of what our economy is based upon. And the reality is a lot of that stuff is just poor nutrition, and sometimes even anti-nutrition. And then they tell you, well, you should just eat more leaves to fill you up so you don't eat so much of the poor nutrition, and don't eat the meat because it's bad for you. And then, oh, by the way, if that doesn't work, take all these drugs. And so this is kind of what we've been sort of trained on. It's like, we're constantly needing to supplement an inadequate diet, and, oh, it's going to make us eat too much, so let's just stuff our gullet up with leaves and indigestible fiber. Yeah. And instead of just like, hey, let's just focus on the high quality nutrition. So I think, there's this concept. There's a guy named Mark Hyman, who's a kind of an alternative medical practitioner, and he has this sort of message of the so-called pegan diet. It's not vegan, but meat is a condiment. It's like just have a little bit of meat there, maybe so you don't develop nutrient deficiencies and die. But to me, that message is almost worse than a vegan diet, because some people would actually buy that. They're like, oh, I'm just going to have a little bit of meat and I'll just eat all this crappy fiat-based food. That to me is worse, because it's more likely people will do it. Whereas a vegan message is like, I ain't doing that crap. It's just it's like most people won't do that. In fact, historically, it's only been 1 to at most 3% of the population giving any period of time, and it's actually gone down recently. So, but meat is something that I would say make it the focus of your diet. And then if you want to add anything else, those things are the condiments. Those are the variety and that type of stuff. And I think that's a very easy thing to do, because I don't think everybody needs to be on a carnivore diet. Even though I advocate for it, I've said many, many times, it is a therapeutic protocol. It is something that you can use, for, as you did, for a period of time, fix things. And you can always go back and forth if you need to. Like if you need to dial things in, if you start feeling, hey, I don't feel as good, I can always, it's kind of like a reset button. Yeah. I think that's an accurate way to use that. It's like a, do over, get an extra life type of thing. Yeah, absolutely. It certainly was for me. One last question. So how do you, because I guess the major criticism against the carnivore diet is, well, vegans criticizing the eating of meat, typically from a position of ethics, right? I mean, I'm sometimes there's an argument like
meat's bad for climate change or something like that. But I think those arguments get debunked pretty quickly when you look at how vegan food is produced and how much resources are consumed, et cetera. How do you handle the ethical argument though? Because that one is tricky. If people just think eating animals is, morally bad or ethically bad, that seems to be kind of a difficult one to address. So how do you handle the criticisms of the carnivore diet in that respect?
Well, with regard to the ethics of that, it's interesting because, I am absolutely appreciative of the fact that when I eat a steak, there's a cow at the other end of that. I mean, I know that. It's no mystery to me. When you consume really any meal, any diet whatsoever, that comes at the expense of a significant loss of life. It doesn't matter if the animal's on your plate or it's lying dead in a field due to a pesticide death, or it's been run over by a grain harvester or whatever. I mean, clearly, just if you think about how we produce food in this country and other countries, we have all this sort of monocrop agriculture where the first thing you do is you go and you till the ground and then you spray all these herbicides and fungicides and pesticides, and you kill everything in that ecosystem. So all the bugs are dead, for one. All the worms, all the things that live under the ground, any animal that was on that land is basically dead or run off. And then all the downstream effects, like when all the bugs die, guess what? The birds start to die because they have nothing to eat, or they're eating pesticide-laced insects, and so they become sick. And so you're killing and sickening and basically harming a lot of animals anyway, regardless. And so one of the maybe most ethical diets would be a diet of meat that is basically harvested in a very, kind of natural way where there's no herbicides, no pesticides. We call it regenerative agriculture, right? So that clearly exists. And if I'm eating one cow, I'm a big guy, so I probably eat 2 cows a year. So but a cow is 550 pounds of meat, and you figure out that's a lot of food. Yeah. Whereas if you're eating whatever the vegan smoothie bowl, I mean, there are hundreds of deaths that go into that food. And so to ignore that or say that's irrelevant or, I think that sort of doesn't make sense to me. And I don't choose my meal based on how many animals I think died. I mean, I think that's just a losing argument, because the answer is never going to be zero. Yeah. I mean, wearing clothes. I mean, if you're wearing clothes, animals are dead for that. So, I mean, I think we should do the best we can to minimize that, and the best we can to, foster as good of quality of life for those animals as we can. So there's a difference between vegans like to talk about animal rights. Animals have the right to whatever. Well, no, they don't. No, they don't. They don't vote. They don't pay any taxes.
Exactly.
They don't have rights. Right. But there's something called animal welfare. Right. And that's what ranchers and farmers do. They actually, and I've been on a lot of ranches. I've talked to a lot of ranchers, and I've actually been with the animals, and they are well taken care of for the most part, particularly cattle. I mean, that's one of the things where, you think about these cows that normally. Well, there was an interesting study out of University of Pennsylvania looking at ruminant animals. They looked at white-tailed deer, and they found that, and they tagged them at birth, and they found that by age 32 weeks, like 62% were already dead. Most of them died of disease, starvation, or being eaten alive. And so that's what the natural history of those animals, whereas you could contrast to a cow who's going to live 2, maybe 3 years, sheltered, fed, protected from predators, protected from disease, made comfortable. I mean, who's to say what that animal would choose? Would you like to be eaten as a 6-week-old baby, or live to be 3, housed? Because I mean, we're inside. We're not sitting outside in the heat. I mean, we're opting to sit in a climate-controlled environment, being fed. I mean, that's my choice. Yeah. And most of us would choose that. And thankfully, we have that option. But to sit there and say, well, an animal, I speak for the animals. And I'm like, I don't know if you do.
Yeah, it's... I don't know, a failure to understand that life feeds on life, and that we do have an evolutionary history at the top of the food chain, right? You can't just, you can't just take that away. Like there's going to be ramifications to us metabolically and health-wise if we just decide we're going to all eat bugs or all eat plants or whatever the thing is. Yeah. And so I agree, that animals, only humans have rights, right? Because we have rationality, is the libertarian argument, which I subscribe to. And, to the extent we can treat animals well and give them a good life, and then harvest them as humanely as possible, as pain-free as possible, to increase our standard of living, that makes sense to me. That's kind of the way of nature. So I don't really see any way out of that. So yeah, I will leave it to you for any closing words for the audience. And then if you don't have any closing words, you could just let us know where people can find you on the internet.
Yeah, I think the biggest lesson that I've discovered as a physician, as someone who's taken care of people for many, many years, is you have to take it upon yourself. Don't depend on me or anyone else to take care of your health. And there's a lot of things you can do outside of the healthcare system. I think a day of reckoning is coming, so to speak, for our healthcare in this country, and we are rapidly reaching that tipping point. I think it's something that if you neglect, how you treat yourself with regard to food, you're going to pay the price sooner or later. I mean, I was able to do it my first 40 years of life, and then it caught up with me. So it eventually catches up with you. And the earlier you learn that lesson, the less suffering you have, and the better quality of life you'll have ultimately. So I think it's, you've got the most skin in the game, and your doctor's literally going to spend 5 minutes once a quarter thinking about you. So you've got to live with those decisions 24 hours a day. So don't, when it comes to healthcare, those people are your consultants. They work for you, not the other way around. And you need to ask questions. And I hated patients to ask questions because it made my day longer and harder. But I'll tell you, as a patient, you need to ask those questions, and you need to be able to say no thanks, and thank you for your advice. I'll take it under consideration, and then do what makes the most sense to you. Because a lot of times, like I said, the incentives of the healthcare industry are not necessarily in your favor all the time. I mean, sometimes they are for sure, but not always.
And then where can people find you online?
Yeah, so you can find me on my social media. I'm at Instagram, Shawn Baker 1967. I'm on Twitter at SBakerMD. I'm on YouTube at Shawn Baker MD. I'm on TikTok at Shawn Baker MD. I'm at Rivero.com, and I'm at Carnivore.diet. And so I have one thing I found is having a community, particularly for people undergoing health transformation. It's important to have a supportive environment, supportive community. And so I provide that every day, basically every single day, 365 days a year. Unless I'm on a plane, I'm doing a meeting. So that's where you can find me.
Awesome. Shawn, thank you for joining me, man.
Appreciate it. Thanks.